Hello, everyone. I'm Arvin. Welcome to the channel where I talk about tech, career development, and personal development. Today, I wanted to go over how I mentally prepared for 9 different Microsoft certification exams over the past 3 years since switching careers into the tech industry. Let me show you what my whiteboard printout looks like. These are the exams I passed. I've passed 2 of the expert level ones, the Azure Solutions Architect and the Azure DevOps Engineer. And I've also done 3 of the associate level ones, the Azure Admin, the AI Engineer, and the Security Operations Analyst. And a little proof that I actually have them. If you want to scroll through my certifications here, all of them actually need to be renewed. Let me get back here. I just wanted to go over this to review how I get myself through these things that a lot of people will consider challenging. Okay. If I bring this up here, the main points about how I prepare for these exams are that I have to convince myself to do it. I have to motivate myself to action by setting deadlines and some best practices on exam day to keep your head in the right space. So let's focus in on one of these. Let me switch my cam. When I go through some of these certification exams, or I start thinking about whether I should challenge one, the first stage of that process is convincing myself to do it. Because there's always reasons not to do something hard, like an exam. The first point would be about cost. These certification exams aren't free to do. So the first point I want to bring about that is to take away that barrier, right? You want to lower the cost. And there's several ways I've done this in the past 3 years. Microsoft Learn has challenges throughout the year where they give you an exam voucher, whether it's a completely free one for an exam or a discounted voucher up to I think the highest I've ever seen is 50%. And the third way was through employee benefits. I was lucky enough in my first job in tech to have an employer that had a deal with Microsoft to get vouchers for 50% off. So if you lower that barrier where cost is no longer a good reason not to do it, then I'm more likely to take the exam, right? I can't pass up a free shot to earn a credential. That seems like a wasted opportunity. And then the next part, when it comes to convincing myself, would be confidence that you're ready for the exam. You got to get through the content, which is almost mandatory for the way I also lower the cost. Because when you go through the Microsoft challenges, there's a body of content you have to go through in order to get the voucher. By getting through the content, you build up your confidence. After spending 30 hours of getting through the material, I feel like I'm ready with a little bit more prep, which would be the next point, right? This is practice test. It's another way of building up your confidence so that you're more likely to convince yourself that you're ready for this exam. So Microsoft has these practice tests for free. Make sure you use those. And if you're the type of person that needs more practice exams or likes having more practice exams, I like them, you can get them through third-party places like WizLabs or maybe Udemy. There's a bunch of good ones. It depends how much you want to spend on preparation, right? Before you even do the real deal, you have to be convinced that you can do it. For me, that's typically cost and boosting my confidence. The next point in my process after I convince myself to do an exam is to actually motivate myself with a deadline, right? I've gone through the content. I feel like I should do this. I've received an exam voucher. You should schedule the exam, right? When you have this deadline that's coming, it allows you to pace your review process, whether that involves going through the content a second time or finding secondary material or going through hands-on learning to gain some hands-on experience, which I do recommend. Having that deadline and seeing those days count down as the exam days approaches is a strong motivator. At least I find it to be that way. When it's just too far out, let's say you gave yourself 3 months to prepare, those first couple weeks, you just don't have that sense of urgency. Pick a reasonable time frame where you know there's this time crunch, which will motivate you into action, bringing it back to the practice exams. I actually like to save them for maybe the last week before the exam comes up, just to be like in the exam mode and to start challenging yourself to actively recall the information under time constraints. The final point I want to talk about for deadlines is since you're in charge of setting it on the calendar, you also have the power to move it away, right? And I found in the last 3 years, every time I actually gave myself more time, I didn't end up studying more. There's that thing where the deadline is not close enough and I don't feel the sense of urgency to tackle it because, life has other things that keeps you busy. So I'd recommend to really consider not rescheduling something, especially if you've already gone through all the steps of like going through the challenges to get the voucher. That's like a lot of learning that you've already put in. And if you needed the confidence boost of like performing consistently on practice exams before scheduling an exam, you should really have a really small time frame. It's like, okay, I've done the content. I score well on practice exams. I schedule an exam. Like, don't set it too far out. right? At least that's what I found out for myself. That's my process there. And then the last point I want to talk about was best practices on exam day. I think this is common advice that is worth repeating. Get sleep the night before. The brain performs better when it's well rested. You have better attention, better focus, better recall of information, which is exactly what you need for an exam like this. Try not to book it right in the morning, especially if you have trouble sleeping before a difficult exam. I tend to schedule it right before lunch so that I have a reasonably empty stomach and I'm also not bloated from having a lunch. That's my favorite time slot. The second point I wrote down was use the open book feature. The Microsoft exams have opened up the Microsoft Learn Platform documentation for search while you're taking the exam. So it's like an open book exam. I would recommend that you gain some hands-on experience with the docs, because I'm surprised by how many times I've done something at work or I've done something on the side where it's like, hey, I've looked up this piece of information. It ends up being a question in the exam. It's like, well, I know roughly where to look for an answer. So the open book feature is really good for that. But I wouldn't use it for every question. That would take too much time. Pace yourself for these exams. I looked up the expert one. It takes like 120 minutes, the exam, and I think they offer you 40 to 60 questions. It's not the same for every person, which means you either have 2 to 3 minutes per question. I would recommend pacing yourself through the exam so that you actually get to see every question and make an educated guess. That would be just my basic advice for the exam day. It's like, answer all the questions. Makes sense. Get some rest. Use the features that are available to you, which in this case is the open book feature. And those are all the points I wanted to go over, which end up being nice and short. And we can wrap this up. So this is how I'm mentally prepared for Microsoft certification exams. It's been roughly the same process from the fundamental levels with the Azure 900 all the way up to the Azure DevOps engineer and Azure Solutions Architect. It's always been find a way to lower the cost, always go through the content to build up your confidence. And I do that through practice exams and going through all the content. Set deadlines, set reasonable ones so that you don't dilly-dally with your free time, especially when you're working full time. And, follow some best practices on exam day. Get some rest, use the features available to you, and pace yourself so you see all the questions and make a good guess at everything and get whatever points you can. If you like these type of videos where you listen to other tech professionals go through their thought process or learning process, I plan on making more of these type of videos. So hit that subscribe button to get notifications on when the next video comes out. I'll see you in the next one.